Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Allure of the Poor. I am sitting here today with Nicole Ruiz Hudson, who is going to be sharing her knowledge and along with a bottle of Prosecco from a very special region. And I'm going to attempt to say this, and I've been practicing, but I'm going to attempt. So I'm gonna mess it up. Maybe I should just let you say it and then I'll repeat it.
Okay, we can do that. I know it. We were just saying it is a bit of a tongue twister, but we are drinking today. We're both drinking wines from Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore DOCG.
There it is. And I put that hard G in there. I say Conegliano. And so that's wrong, right?
Okay, I think
Conegliano.
Correctly.
I'm sure it's not supposed to have a hard G. I'm sure it's not supposed to have a hard G. So Conegliano Valdobbiadene Superiore DOCG. All right. And we are going to get into what that actually means. But the first thing I want to do is show this beautiful bottle of what I am drinking. So this is Zardetto, and it is a Prosecco Superiore DOCG, and it is one of the oldest producers in the region. So I'm excited to taste it, and I have to tell you, I already did. Well, I'll raise a glass. Are you already poured for yours?
I am. Okay. Cheers.
So slancha or salute.
Salute. And I guess I should share what I'm drinking since
since
we're drinking different bottles. I am drinking a bottle from L'Antica Quercia, and that is the L'Antica Quercia A, which is for Ancestrale. And this is a Sculevity, which I'm not sure I'm pronouncing correctly, but and it is a Brut Nature, and we'll get to in a little. I'll explain later what that means.
That is right, because that is actually something very special,
and pretty new.
Yes.
And old. It's both new and old.
And you have to love it when something can be new and old at the same time. And we'll get into that too, because there's actually a couple of new things that have just been allowed into the Conegliano Valdobbiadene Superiore DOCG. But before we get into that, I want everybody to know who you are. So do you want to just do a little brief bio of yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I have been lucky enough to be to join you for Wine Writers Wrap Up a few times before, but I am my name is Nicole Ruiz Hudson. I am a writer and blogger. I blog mostly about wines at sommstable.com. I also do a little bit of PR work, and we do a little bit of PR work, and I get to work. I'm very lucky to get to do a bit of work for Conegliano Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore DOCG. Or we can shorten it to Prosecco Superiore DOCG.
All right. And I absolutely, first of all, I think that Prosecco in general I think it's been popular for a while, but I think it is increasing in popularity. And I have to say, because of the Superiore DOCG, I think that's really why it is increasing in the popularity, because there has been past notion that Prosecco is a lower level sparkling wine, which I don't
Cheap
exactly.
And cheerful, yeah.
Yeah, and with this Superiore DOCG, they are disproving that it is fresh, it is exciting, but in addition to that, it is delicious, and it is well worthy of celebrations and day, and a daily drink. And that's what I think is making it so spectacular.
I think that's totally true. And if you don't mind, I can just jump into delineating what the differences are.
Yes.
To help clarify a little bit. So the Prosecco Superiore DOCG area, that zone is a very small, tiny, and specific zone that's it's very hilly. It's just basically north. If you drive north from Venice, about 50 kilometers from Venice and about 100 from the Dolomites. So you're in the foothills of the Dolomites, and you have this very dramatic, these very dramatic landscapes and vistas that I can talk about a little bit more. They're quite unique. Talk more about it in a bit. So it's this tiny, tiny zone made up of 15 communes. It's actually the original Prosecco zone. I think it originally got delineated as a specific zone in 1969, and then it became DOCG in 2009. So you had this tiny little zone, but you had a lot of producers that, of course, wanted to be able to make more of this lovely, easy drinking, sparkling wine. So to allow for more production to be made at this sort of entry level point, they created another zone, which is much wider. It tends to be mostly in valley areas. And it can be in, I want to say, 9 different communes that spread throughout both Veneto and Friuli Venezia Giulia. So it's a much wider area. And there's less restriction in those areas. So even though you can have the really lovely wines coming from those areas too, it is, that's where you get those easy drinking, cheap and cheerful wines. Whereas the Prosecco DOCG zone is this very tiny area that is far more artisanal, and the restrictions are much more stringent. And you have, and actually they're pretty terroir driven wines as well.
Absolutely. And that, everybody always talks about real estate is location, location, location. And those hills aren't like it's funny because they call them hills. They are steep. They are very steep hills.
Yeah, they are.
And so in this terroir, what makes champagne is that limestone. And that's what's here also is the limestone. And that region with that steepness and the limestone really does make it superior, which is the perfect.
And you're 100% right that even though we're calling them, even though they're sort of the foothills of the Dolomites, you're absolutely right that it's super, super steep. I actually had the pleasure to go there. It was one of my last trips before COVID. So I had
nice.
I had the chance to go in 2019, and you sort of, as you're driving in from the airport in Venice, you start to climb, and then all of a sudden you have this very dramatic landscape coming all around you, very little hairpin turns around hillsides. They're just like breath. Yeah, just absolutely jaw-droppingly beautiful. I 100% recommend going when people can again, because it's very special. Just very beautiful. And actually the landscape, in 2019, they got awarded a UNESCO World Heritage Site for their cultural landscape. So it's particularly special. And that cultural landscape designation is meant to celebrate the interaction between the landscape that is there and how the people of the area have come to work with it. So it's like this beautiful interplay between the culture and the existing land.
And now I don't know if you've been there during this time, but they actually have a celebration of it, right? It's and I just lost the name of the celebration. It's probably like Superiors. Conegliano Valdobbiadene Festival, and they celebrate it over months. So it's like a 3-month celebration. And from what I understand, that's exactly what the celebration is. Is that relationship.
I did not get to go there during that particular time, but it sounds lovely. And I think as soon as you go there too, you see how special it is, as you really see, like we were talking about, these dramatic hillsides. And then the way, the cultural part of it is that the farmers that have worked there found this method of creating these very special terrace slopes, these terraces that that are a little different from how you see terraces most other places. Like they're usually stony. These are they use grass actually to create the terraces, which so it has this very patchwork look. I don't know, it kind of in a way sort of reminds me of I don't know, something about it reminded me of like Lord of the Rings, even though it's like,
oh, now I have to go. I have to go now. Oh my gosh.
It's like this like very quaint, beautiful. You see, then you see the patchwork on the hillsides, and that's it. It's really hard to work there. So it takes the workers in this area many more hours per year. I think it's 800. It's 800 in the DOCG Superiore zone versus the DOC zone. 800 to 150 hours is the difference of what it takes to work this land. So they call it heroic viticulture because like you're working on these like sometimes 70-degree slopes that are just crazy.
I wonder if they use the, you know, like some of the really steep slopes they're harnessed in, which makes, you know, like that just for safety issues. Is like, it's got to be tough to harvest when you're on a thing like, you know.
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't seen harnesses, but I have seen these like, although I guess they should have that. I've seen these sort of like rigs that they use to, because you can't use tractors, so you can't use the typical methods because the tractor would just topple. So I've seen photos anyway of these rigs that they use to sort of transport like baskets of grapes from one place to another. So it's like a pulley system.
Oh, okay.
Which is, yeah. Interesting.
Kind of like the pulley system they used in Game of Thrones to go up there, right? They had that.
Right. We're just covering all the key worlds I love.
Absolutely. So what makes Prosecco is that very special Glera grape. So you want to give us a little background on Glera and like how, you know, what it's about and why it's so special in this area. And while you're talking, I'm going to drink.
Absolutely. So Glera is so for a while the grape was referred to as Prosecco, but it got so confusing to have the area and the grape and everything that they went back to a traditional term for the grape, which is Glera. And what is special about this grape is semi-aromatic, and which is what gives you all of these like lovely floral, pretty fruity notes that you're trying to enhance when you make Prosecco or Prosecco Superiore DOCG. And for this reason, the typical method of making the wine is through the Martinati or the Sharmat method, which differs from a traditional method wine in that the second fermentation doesn't happen in the bottle, it happens in a tank, but in this system, it helps preserve the beautiful aromatics and those lovely floral and pear and like white peach aromas that you get from this lovely grape.
Right. And typically, and this kind of leads right into something that you had mentioned at the very beginning, is that typically the non-superiore DOCG Proseccos, those, how did you say it? The festive,
cheap and cheerful.
Cheap and cheerful.
I feel like
cheap and cheerful.
Term up from Jancis or something.
Okay. So those cheap and cheerful Proseccos, they're not aged on lees. They're very crisp, they're very fresh, and their second fermentation is done in that tank, and then they're getting released, and they're known for their freshness. But one of these things that was just allowed into the Superiore DOCG is that we are seeing Proseccos that are aged on lees. And before you get into that, I just want to explain for people who don't know, lees are basically the dead yeast cells. and they play a big impact on that profile of any wine, any sparkling wine, or even any wine being on the lees gives a profile. So you want to go into what's new about the Superiore?
Yeah, so, well, I think I should clarify a little bit too, that most Prosecco of all kinds is made via that Sharmat method. So, or the Martinati method, since Martinati's from this area, so we'll go with him. So most of the wine is made in this way that is used to help preserve those pretty fruity notes and the aromatics. Now, what the Levity category, it's a new category or typology that they have allowed in as of 2019. This is a method that it's actually the oldest method of making, though it's the very traditional method of making Prosecco in the region. It's the way it was done beforehand, before the Martinati method was developed, and I think it was around the turn of the century. And the way that what happens in this case is that the second fermentation does happen in the bottle. The lees are trapped inside, so they're not disgorged. So you often get a little bit of a cloudiness. And this was traditionally referred to as col fondo. Now under the DOCG, under the new typology, it's referred to as levity. There are very slight differences between the two. Like col fondo has a slightly, like if you were to go with col fondo, I believe the specifics are that the pressure is a little can be a little bit lower, and then the other thing as well is that a couple of producers had trademarked col fondo. So for the wider region,
right,
they use levity, which is both tends to be made has to be made at the spumante level, so a little bit more bubbly, and then also it's brut nature, so it is there's zero dosage, there's nothing. It's what's there. It's bone dry.
And I think that's funny that it used to be made this way. Then the Sharmat method came. I'm going to say, pronounce his name again.
Martinati.
I you know who I have, and I don't want to say, I have the San Francisco guy, the radio guy in my head, and that's how I keep wanting to say Marconi. And like, no. So Martinati came up with this method, and kind of the traditional way went away because this was such a spectacular way to make the Prosecco. And I just love, it's the adage of saying, what comes around goes around, what's old is new again, that they're now this old traditional method is resurging. And so it is a little different because my sparkling actually was produced on lees. They held it on lees for 6 months. So there is a little bit of that toastedness. It's not nutty. It's not past that at that point. But I think that's something that else is with the Superiore DOCG is just more care and concern and winemaking paying attention to. I don't want to make it sound like Prosecco doesn't do that, because they do, but there's more of it in the Superiore DOCG.
Well, and to this point too, like even though there's a lot of very small producers in the DOCG area, there are also like some of the same producers are making wines in both. So oftentimes if you want, if you have a favorite brand already, that's maybe perhaps a little bit bigger, they are probably making both DOC and DOCG wines. And sometimes it's really fun to explore the differences. I've had a chance to to do that a couple of times where I've had a chance to taste through. Well, not even, well, we're not even going to get into Asolo today very much, but there's another little region called Asolo, and some producers make from, in all three areas, and you can taste very, nuanced differences for those terroir geeks of us out there. It's really fun. And the nice part is that the cost difference between the various different levels is very, very, very small. It's a matter of a couple, like $2 to $3 sometimes. And you can, and so it's a fun experiment to do.
Wow. Yeah. And, that really does show. I love doing, side by sides for different vintage, different vineyards, or, the thing is that you can really taste that terroir, because you're talking about the same winemaker. So you're talking about probably the same winemaking process. The only thing that's really different is where those grapes are coming from. So those side by sides are just so much fun for, to geek out on, and to really,
and to get a real handle on what it is that, wine geeks are talking about. When I think there's no better way to learn than to see for yourself,
Right. And now, so you were talking about the Soulevity. The other new thing that is with the Superiore DOCG is that they added the extra brut, which you also kind of talked about a little bit. You want to just go a little further into that?
So I'll just talk a little bit about the levels in general. So for generally speaking, for Prosecco Superiore DOCG, it can be made anywhere from dry to extra dry, and now they've added, as you said, the extra brut category. So the extra brut category is the most crisp. It's the most minerally in profile. It feels a little more modern. Extra dry has a little bit of residual sugar left in. I tend to feel like it doesn't taste, most well-made versions don't taste sweet. They taste very balanced. It's just a bit fruity. And I love these. This is actually the most sort of considered the classic for the region, but I love these for pairing with slightly spicy foods. I think I've shared this in various places many times, but one of my husband's favorite takeout options is Szechuan, and this is so super spicy. Usually I'm grabbing a bottle of the extra dries to pair, because I think it refreshes your palate a whole bit. And then there's dry and extra dry, which there's yes, and then there's dry at the end, which is a bit sweeter. And this you might actually have for either a fruit dessert or a little bit, or maybe richer foods too, because that hint of sugar sometimes works really nicely with things like foie gras and other fatty foods.
Right. And I think that is something a little bit confusing, I think, to the general public, because when the general populace hears dry, they think it's dry, and they're not, I think their brain kind of goes, that should be the beginning of it. And that's really kind of,
And I left out brut, but somehow, and brut, I'm just realizing brut falls in between extra dry and extra brut. So it's a little bit in between those two, a little more crisp, sort of in that modern space as well. And then for the Soulevitys, these are made in they call it as brut nature. They refer to those as brut nature, which is essentially the same as extra brut almost.
Right. And so let's go back. You had mentioned that there's 15 communes in the Prosecco Superiore DOCG, and I'm going to ask you, I really don't know what this means. There are 43 specific Prosecco Superiore Rive in the DOCG.
Rive.
So what is a Rive?
So they think of the Rive as their sort of premier cru vineyards, and they're specific vineyards. Rive means hillside or slope, and there's specific areas specific slopes that they have designated, that they have sort of recognized for a particular terroir and particular attributes. So that is what the Rive are. So if you see that, I still don't see them as often as I would like here. So if you see one, I would snatch it up.
Snatch it up.
and
okay.
then while we're talking about it, these like sort of premier cru and grand cru, they consider there's one hill, one very special hill called the Hill of Cartizze, and they consider this their grand cru, which is teeny tiny. It's like I said, one hill in total, about like 107 or 108
hectares. Yeah.
And very tightly packed. It is, I believe, my understanding is that it is the sort of per hectare, it is the most expensive place to buy vineyards in all of Italy. So
it's
quite
all right.
It's very special.
If they are the grand cru, the premier, absolutely. And have you that's not what you have, right?
That's not what I have today.
But you had it.
I have had the Cartizzes. They are lovely. They're very complex. The most traditional way of making a Cartizze is traditionally produced in a dry style. So it is traditionally made to be a little sweeter. However, a few producers do make actually dry versions, like brut.
Right. And so what do you think about the Cartizze? Is it the steepest? Is it the highest altitude? What do you think about the Cartizze that makes it the DOCG?
It is. I think it's a combination of all of those things. I went to a restaurant there that's perched on the hillside, so you can walk outside and you can see down. And it's very steep. But it's also it's also the particular mix of soils, which I want to say is mostly sandstone, but I would need to double check myself. I would need to double check myself on that one.
Okay. Did I misspeak? I thought I did read that there is a lot of limestone in the area. Did I misspeak? I mean, I know there's sandstone in the area.
So I believe there is limestone more in the Valdobbiadene area.
Right. Oh,
so,
okay.
So what's interesting too is that those tongue twisting names, Conegliano and Valdobbiadene, were chosen because they are two villages essentially that have principal importance. So Conegliano, which is in the eastern section of the region, is the cultural capital. So you can stay there. It's this lovely town. There's lots of nice places to eat. And then Valdobbiadene is the production capital. Right. And in addition to this, they also have their differences. So in Conegliano, it's more of the rolling hillsides, which are still pretty steep, but they're a little less steep. And then the soils are more clay-based mixed with sandstone. And then, if I'm not mistaken, then in Valdobbiadene, you have more of a mixture that's more sandstone. I believe there's some limestone mixed in as well, and steeper hillsides. So then it's hard to get to the specificity of tasting between the two areas, but if you can, it's also another fun one to do. But Conegliano's the wines produced in Conegliano tend to they're both fruity, but the Conegliano wines have like this rounded fruit profile that's a little more fleshy and maybe perhaps a little more structured. And then in Valdobbiadene, it's a little bit more delicate. It's a delicate fruity profile and with floral notes and a little bit more minerality.
Okay, awesome.
Coming from some of those, I think, because of the mixture of soils as well. And then Cartizze, which we were talking about, is in Valdobbiadene.
Okay, and it's like the highest. No.
I would need to double check, but it's like it's one special hill that's extremely steep.
Steep. Okay. So it's the steepness okay. Awesome. All right. So going back to the grape itself, It is, the Glera grape is originally from the area, right? This is,
Yes.
you had mentioned about how this is the original area that was made for Prosecco. But then they wanted to expand it because they needed more Prosecco, right?
Right.
Kind of, okay. And so there's a large portion of people who produce in multiple areas, and just in the Prosecco DOC and in the Superiore DOCG.
Yeah.
Do you think that they, like, in terms of us getting stuff here in the United States, is one easier than the other to get?
I mean, I think some of the bigger brands are always just tend to be easier to find, but some of these, but even their DOCG wines will be made in this more traditional, excuse me, this more hands-on, gosh, I'm losing my words. This more like handmade, that has more, because the grapes for the DOCG area, for the Superiore DOCG area, have all have to be handpicked. So
Okay.
It is more artisanal, regardless of what size.
That's one of the regulations of being a Superiore DOCG is hand picking.
Yes. Okay. And so I think some of the bigger brands, you just tend to have national distribution. So you may be able to find them more easily across the country. I think a lot of really wonderful artisanal producers, and we're talking like, I mean, well, you of all people know how this works, right? like you know, a lot of times this is like a family. It's a husband and wife team, right? or two generations or something along these lines, that they're tending to their vineyards and their winery. And there are quite a few of them. I think in 2020, there were 192 in total. I wrote down for myself. And so very small operations. And I think these are very worth seeking out. And I think the difference might be in this distribution level. I think sort of different areas of the country, you may be able to find certain smaller producers more easily, and depending on where their importers and distributors are, and then so you may not be able to find the same ones all over the place. I think that's more the
right.
I think what I've seen.
Right. Well, that's actually very common with anything that's being imported. There's usually the New York, the East Coast importers, or Washington, D.C., and then you have the West Coast, the California, and very often you're seeing two different wineries, that are kind of equivalent, but two different wineries. Some go to the East Coast, some go to the West Coast.
And I have found Superiore DOCG bottles at certainly at Whole Foods, at a lot of the bigger retailers out here as well. So I think it's just a matter of looking for that extra designation on the label. Oh, we should maybe point out that on the capsule, one way to find it easily, on the capsule, there's a little flag that will say DOC or DOCG. That's one way to tell. It's usually also at the back of the bottle too.
Right. And they I think, yes, mine does. I was going to say I'm pretty sure mine says it on the front also.
Very possibly.
Right. And, I would tend to think that that's an honor to be able to call your wine that. So you're going to find it. So let's get into the wine a bit. So mine is Zardetto. And I have to say, I looked on their website, and they are very modern and very, I hate it. Hip is like the only word I can think of. The videos that are on their website and how they're producing, my guess is that they just went through a rebranding, that their label might have just changed, because the whole video is filled with color and music that is just beautiful. And so it was interesting to me because they are one of the oldest producers in the Superiore DOCG, they've actually been producing Prosecco there for 40 years, in that area for 40 years. So, and they were actually one of the first wineries to actually import their Prosecco into the United States. So they've been around for quite some time, and they're keeping up with modern times in their marketing. But
well, what's interesting is that mine is sort of opposite to yours in a couple of different ways. Even though mine is the Sweet Levity, the producer for this, the Lentica Quercia's owner, whose name is Claudio Francavilla, he does not come from a multi-generational wine producing family. He left the business world, I think just under 15 years ago, and decided to switch over and produce. He wanted to make wine. He wanted a more agricultural lifestyle.
Awesome.
And he was very drawn to this particular style of wine. Oh, I should actually mention a couple of things just for if people want more details. That Wine and Spirits in August did a really great piece on this new category, on the Sweet Levity and Col Fondo, like the sort of whole tradition of the wines. So in August, if you can look for that if you want more detailed info, and this producer Lentica Quercia is included there. Okay. And then if you want just like more info in general on the whole region, Wine Enthusiast did a really great piece that at the beginning of last year.
Awesome. Fantastic.
That kind of goes into the details.
Awesome. Yeah. Now this wine is on the label, it says long Sharmat. So you want to explain the difference between what Sharmat is and a long Sharmat?
Well, I think that's in reference to what you were talking about before, Lori, that the extended lees contact, that they let it sit on the lees in the tank. Yeah. Okay. So still the Sharmat method, right? So still that tank method, but they're leaving the lees in there. And then the difference is, of course, if one wants to compare it to traditional method wines, traditional method sparkling wines, even though you're going to have lees contact in the tank, it's still not as much contact than you would see in a bottle. So you're going to have less of that toasty, like you were saying.
Right, absolutely. So this wine, they said the second fermentation took about 40 days. That I think is pretty consistent. But then the fact that the 6 months on lees, where I'm guessing, I don't know, in a typical Sharmat method, how long is it staying in that tank? Do you know before?
I think it varies a little bit by producer and what they're trying to achieve, but yeah, much less. And so that, because you're a lot of times what they're trying to do is get that sort of those pretty floral aromatics and that fruitiness. Right. And then with mine, well, we kind of talked about what that whole what the winemaking is for this style. Yeah, for this style. It is, in addition, aged in the bottle for 1 year before release. And I have to say, like, even though it has texture and it has roundness from that extra lees contact, it is very crisp. It is lots of minerals here, lots of minerality still in this wine. And it's, for this one, it's kind of interesting. It's a little hazy, but it's still, I don't know, it has a brightness despite its haziness.
That makes sense. I know what you mean. This is crystal clear, and there is, like, if I was blind tasting it, I would say there was lees. You can taste the impact of the lees, but again, it's like a toast. You ever see that picture on Facebook, which toast is your favorite toast color? Like 1, 2, 3, and the 10 is like black and the 1 is just slightly browned. That's it. Like that perfect toast that comes out of the toaster. That's what this has. But it's not what's in front. That's on the back palate, is that.
So that's so interesting, because I have not had that wine. I'm going to have to check that out, because that sounds like a lot of fun. It sounds like a sort of in between a little bit, like just a little bit of pastry with your fruit.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it is. And it's aromatic. It's got,
Let me pour myself more.
I'm horrible with the flowers. You know what? It even has a little bit of, see, I'm not going to say honey, of like agave, like, you know,
like a sort of a fresh greenness kind
yeah,
of.
yeah. And it's got its floral aromatics. And it is fresh. It's refreshing, and it could be dangerous because it's only 11.5% alcohol. So
actually, same here. I think that's about average for
I think
for
so,
the
right?
region. And but yeah, jumping off of that, like mine on the nose, I get like white. It's like if a peach crashed onto a craggy stone. That's kind of what I smell, along with like some fresh flower, like white flowers mixed in. And then on the palate, it's kind of it's a really, it's still that white peach, still those stones, like a really crisp pear, and like even more of that minerality. I get that even more on the palate than I did on the nose.
This is a rounded prosecco. Like it's refreshing, but it's not that crisp. It's not that crisp. It's beautiful. I absolutely love it. But it's different, and that's the lees, I think.
Yes.
It just kind of rounds itself in on your tongue, and it does have the peach. It does have the aromas. Like if you're driving through that peach farm during blossom, whatever, it's there. But the lees really kind of rounds it down, so it doesn't have that crisp acidity that pops in your face, but there's acids there.
Yeah, like similar, because like I mean, this one also of course has leaves, so similar. It has a roundness up front, and I think without with because this is Brut Nature, there's no sugar. I think without that sort of hint of roundness, this would maybe even feel almost too crisp in a way. Like it sort of balances it out, because then you have that citrus, like it sort of has all those rounded fruit notes up front, but then it finishes with like lemon juice and stones. So I think if you didn't have some texture there to balance it out, it would almost feel, it would almost feel a little like
right.
off kilter.
So I also want to bring up part of the Superiore DOCG. They started a promotion back, I think in May, called Table with Us. And
yes.
You reached out to me, and I was so grateful to be part of this promotion. It was what a wonderful concept to do. So do you want to just talk a little bit about the promotion? Because, I know it was back in May, but it is constantly going and should be constantly be going.
Absolutely. So this is it's a continuation of a initiative that they had in Italy called A Tavola con Noi, which translates to At Table with Us, where just they're trying to encourage recognizing that we're all in this place where we're just starting to open up again, and that restaurants have been hurting. They're sort of trying to encourage people to go out and eat out at their favorite places again, either or order in. And then if you can, order a bottle of Prosecco Superiore DOCG to pair with your food. So it's like the little happy marriage of supporting your local restaurants and enjoying it with one of these beautiful wines. Because also tying into all of this is the fact that I think sparkling wines in general tend to have a problem that like people don't think about them with food, but sort of as a broad category, they are they actually are some of the best food wines. And I think in some cases that goes doubly for the Prosecco Superiore DOCG wines, because I find that they work with things that even that traditional method wines may not work with so well, particularly like I was talking about spicy cuisines, things with a lot, in both in terms of heat and also spicy, and that maybe has a lot of flavors like spices and herbs. It sort of works across the board. It sort of folds seamlessly into just about anything that you can, that you might be having. It just works very easily. It's not going to challenge pretty much like just about anything that you're having. It's of course very traditional for aperitivo, but it also works with meaty dishes, salumis. For mine in particular, I saw one recommendation was with pizza bianca, the white pizza. I was thinking about doing, maybe you could share what you're going to do with yours later, Lori, but I'm thinking of doing this with a creamy chicken pasta with lots of herbs as well, because it's sort of both the texture can sort of match and then balance I think a cream sauce, pork.
We're going to do it with a pasta dish with some fresh rosemary and just like a Provence, wrong country, but like some fresh herbs and stuff into the pasta. Just kind of toss it all together. That's what we're having with it.
You and I are in similar wavelengths then.
Yes.
I will toast you while I'm having dinner.
Right with you. But yeah, I think that it is such a wonderful idea, at table with us, because it really is true. It's been hard for everybody, but those small mom and pop restaurants and all of those, they really have been hit hard, and they're still being hit hard because now they can't get workers to work. Now they can open, but nobody wants to work anymore. So that's,
and the regulations are constantly changing.
Yes.
They're going back in, back out. It's really hard. To figure
inside, outside. Right. I mean, Paso just went to no more inside. It's like every day it's a new thing. But the thing that I in addition to that, like you had said, Prosecco kind of has always been thought of as, it's like you said, sparkling as the aperitivo. And these wines are so much more. There's nothing wrong with starting your evening off with it.
Certainly not.
Absolutely not. But there's Proseccos, and especially these Superiore DOCGs, that can go across any course in the meal. And that's really impressive.
Yeah. And I think I think people don't necessarily think about it with slightly heavier dishes, but like the fact that it has acidity and those refreshing bubbles often helps to sort of cleanse the palate or refresh your palate when you're having something a little with a little more substance that is perhaps a little heavier on the palate. Yeah. This can be really refreshing.
Absolutely.
It helps you take a sip so that you can continue eating more.
Yes. And we all want to be able to do that.
Yeah. And then just to tie into one more to the at table with us, if you happen to take a picture of something you're having from a restaurant with a bottle of Prosecco Superiore DOCG, you put it on Instagram and hashtag it at table with us, and we'll see it. And we'll share it.
And everybody should be doing that. I mean, to go back to this for a second, my wine, you're talking about something that is so selective and such a small little area, and so much care, concern, and hand, work into it. And this bottle can be found between $23 and $25, $28 a bottle. And they start at around 15. They start around in that 15 range, which I think is crazy. Like you're saying, for the amount of work that people are putting into these. And they're heroes on those steep slopes, getting those grapes.
It's heroic viticulture. It really is. It's pretty intense.
Yeah. So it is incredible. It is an incredible value. And the difference, like you had mentioned, you're only talking like $2 or $3 difference in a bottle for the DOC versus the Superiore DOCG. Like that's like unheard of, that.
I agree. Yeah. I think it's crazy. It's like the QPR here, the cost to the quality to price ratio. Jeez. tongue tied is pretty amazing.
Yeah. And I you know what, these wines are winners, and you can't, I don't think you can ask for a better QPR and, this all roundness that these wines offer. There should be more. Yeah, and there should be more in everybody's house. Although do not saber them.
Well, the thing is that when you saber a wine, you lose a lot of wines. It's a lot less.
Well, that is
for
true.
You to drink.
That is true. There is
and
the technique. There is the technique. I've gotten pretty good at not losing the wine, but
you lose bubbles too.
You do lose bubbles. But these wines are fantastic. And, at Table with Us is an incredible initiative that I'm so happy to be able to share with my listeners and to be part of. So is there anything, we're at about an hour. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to make sure you get out there for either the DOCG or at Table with Us?
Actually, now that you mentioned it, there is one thing. As a region, this is a region that is very eco-conscious. There are a lot of organic and biodynamic producers. This wine actually happens to be organic, but the region as a whole banned the use of glyphosate in 2019. So they were the first to do it. So this is Roundup in layman's terms. So nobody here is using it. It's and they're pushing forward. It's an area that's like really constantly trying to do things better, do right by the environment.
Right. And that I did read that. That's awesome.
And I think, we've mentioned this several times, but I think it's worth reiterating that this is a region of small producers. These are families, these are couples working together, generations working together to make a pretty affordable and wonderful product.
Absolutely. That is so versatile that, there should just be more in your cellar, in your stash, so that you can just pull it out whenever you're in the mood. Because no matter what, it makes you happy.
It does. Absolutely.
It totally makes you happy.
And thanks so much for having me, Lori, having me on. And it's always fun to talk to you. So happy to have you be part of At Table with Us. And this has been a blast.
Well, thank you very much for sharing all the information and for sharing the wine. And there will be more posts of At Table with Us upcoming. And, people, go to your local shops and ask for it. If it's not there, ask for it, because when you ask for it, they get it. And that helps that helps these small producers who are looking for importers, who are looking for that. If you ask, those wine shops are going to get them. So with that, I would like to say salute, Nicole.
Salute.
And I hope to see you again soon. And maybe one of these days in real life. So we'll get there eventually.
Yeah, I'm overdue for a trip down to Paso myself. So
come by. I am always happy to go tasting and bring people tasting. So come on down.
That'd be really fun.
Come on down. Always happy to go. Spur of the moment. Oh, you want to go tasting? Okay. Well, thank you again for sharing this with me and my listeners. And for everybody else, remember, should we try to say it one more time? We have a Conegliano Valdobbiadene Superiore DOCG.
Well done.
Awesome.
Cheers, Lori.
Cheers. Have a great night.
Bye.